All right. Well, it is 6:30, so we are going to go ahead and get started. Um, Welcome everybody to this evening's program, 12 African American Space Explorers with Dr. William Thierfelder. Glad everybody could join us. Couple of housekeeping items. We are recording tonight's program, and I will send out the link to the recording after it's available on our YouTube channel. Uh, I'm also going to drop the link to the survey to tonight's program in the chat. And if you can take a few moments at the end of the program to fill that out and let us know how we did. That helps us to continue to be able to offer programs like these. If you have suggestions for topics you'd like to see, please put them in the comments section because we do get some of our best ideas that way. We are going to ask folks to remain muted so that we don't have background noise and we can get a good quality recording. If you have questions, you can type them in the chat and we will save time at the end for those questions. I did also want to mention some upcoming programs. So I'm going to take a minute here and share my screen. So hopefully now you are seeing my screen. And the first program that I want to mention is 10 Vegetables to Grow in the Spring in Kansas City. We have it at a number of different branches, but if you're wanting to attend in person, you've got a bunch of options there. The March 3rd program at 6 p.m. is a hybrid program, so that is at our Antioch branch in person as well as on Zoom. You do need to register to receive the Zoom link if you're wanting to attend virtually. Then on March 4th, we have a night at the Oscars Best Actress Spotlight. Dr. Annette Bohanec is going to be back with us, and she's going to be talking this time about the Best Actress Award since we're in Oscar season. And we'll be talking about noteworthy performances by actresses, as well as exciting victories and shocking upsets. That one is at 6:30 on Zoom. Then on March 12th at 6:30, Dr. Thierfelder will be back with us for the audacious adventures of Nellie Bly. So investigative reporter, an inventor, a businesswoman, and a world traveler. We'll learn how Bly became a household name by doing things that the reserved Victorian woman just wasn't supposed to do. And then he'll be back again a couple days later on March 16th as part of our celebration of Women's History Month. We've got the Worlds of Eleanor Roosevelt. That one is also at 6:30 on Zoom. So arguably the most influential First Lady in American history, Eleanor Roosevelt continued her work as a philanthropist and humanitarian long after FDR's death. So we'll look at her work in as a civil rights advocate, a feminist, and one of the driving forces behind the United Nations. And then finally, on March 24th, to wrap up our celebration of Women's History Month, we're going to be joined by art historian Martha Chiacharo and explore the floral paintings of renowned women artists since the 17th century. So Rachel Roish, Mary Mosier, Berthe Morsut, Mary Cassatt and Georgia O'Keeffe are just some of the artists that she will touch on. So with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen here, and I'll let Dr. Thierfelder take over and get started.
Okay, and you should be seeing my screen now, my
Yep.
slide full screen, yes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Mid-Continent Public Library's presentation called 12 African American Space Explorers. My name is Dr. Bill Thierfelder, and I'll be your host this evening. Now, for those of you who don't know me, I'm a retired professor of arts and humanities and a docent emeritus from the American Museum of Natural History in New York City. I live in Portland, Oregon, and that is where I'm speaking to you from tonight, and where I'm an artist, writer, and lecturer. Now, because we can't cover everything about our topic in a 65, 70-minute program, I'd like to invite you to explore further on my website, which is makingwings.net, and take deeper dive number 13. So let me demonstrate for you. So it's one word, makingwings.net. And if you click on that, um, you will be brought to my homepage. If you go to the upper left corner, there's what's called a hamburger menu. If you click on that, you're going to see a lot of things in a drop down. Please feel free to visit any of these, including my lecture schedule. But for this evening's purpose, we're going to go to this first batch of deeper dives. You're wanting number 13. So you click on that downward arrow. These are all programs that I have given or will be given. And again, please feel free to visit any of them. But tonight it's African American Space Explorers. And I give you some recommended media. I will be talking about some of these books during the presentation. If you don't have a paper and pencil handy, you can always come here and copy it. Um, I have printed resources as well as video resources that I think you would enjoy. And then some additional material that I'm also going to touch on tonight before we get to the astronauts. 12 African Americans who have contributed to space exploration, and some other resources in the program about some of the astronomers, some of the behind the scenes people, and of course, some of the astronauts themselves. And for any of these, all you have to do is click on the resource you want. And then when you're done, you click it off and you're back on my page. So it's kind of one-stop shopping. So I hope you can take advantage of Deeper Dive 13 on makingwings.net. Now, everything that you will hear in the program this evening uses the web resources and the books that you just saw on my website. But for this presentation, I especially used the following sources to build its structure and its script. Individual astronaut profiles on the NASA website and individual astronaut pages on vetted articles on Wikipedia. These were particularly helpful in creating this program. Now, as you saw, I have a section devoted to recommended media. And I'd like to mention a few of them now. The first group tells of the Black men and women who truly helped get America's space program up and running and flying. We Could Not Fail by Richard Paul and Stephen Moss. Hidden Figures by Margot Shetterly, which also comes in a young reader's edition. And the wonderful 2016 award-winning film adaptation of Shetterly's book. All three are terrific introductions to the extraordinary barriers that African Americans faced but also how NASA helped to clear away some of those barriers. Now, if you have younger readers in your household, T.M. Moody's African American Astronauts and Space Pioneers is a fine introduction to the topic. And if you want to hear from the astronauts themselves, well, two books that I really enjoy are Mae Jemison's Find Where the Wind Goes and Leland Melvin's Chasing Space. And as I said, I have more suggestions on my website, makingwings.net, dive number 13. Now, before we look at 12 remarkable astronauts, I want to give a shout out to a group of men and women who have become the shoulders on which those astronauts stand. So let's just give a quick shout out to five exceptional astronomers. The 18th century polymath Benjamin Banneker was a free black man living in Maryland who taught himself math and astronomy at a time when most black people, free or slaves, weren't even allowed to read or write, let alone learn math and the sciences. He became one of the chief surveyors of what would become Washington, D.C., and designed and constructed the entire irrigation system for his farm. And if that weren't enough, he built precision clocks. But Banneker's claim to fame was the almanac that he produced between 1792 and 1797 that were most important for their astronomical contributions, which included his own calculations about eclipses, the location of planets in the night sky, as well as extensive star charts. He also produced exceedingly accurate tide charts that the local Chesapeake Baymen found invaluable. Next up, we have Walter McAfee, who was one of the first black men to earn a master's degree in engineering from Ohio State University. With his degree in hand, he joined the Army Signal Corps in 1942 as an engineer at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey. There, he became part of Project Diana, which successfully received radar echo signals between the Earth and the Moon, a first step towards making a trip there a possibility, because now we knew the exact distance and could proceed with pinpoint accuracy. After earning a PhD in physics in 1949, McAfee returned to his work at Fort Monmouth, where he served for 42 more years. After his death, the government created the McAfee Center at the fort, which you see on the bottom right of your screen. Let's hear it for Derek Pitts. He earned a name for himself as the chief astronomer and planetarium director at the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia, a position he still holds. He's overseen the planetarium's programs and exhibits for over 2 decades. Dr. Pitts is a born educator and a real people person, which is why he has hosted a program, a radio program on a local radio in Philadelphia, and he's also served as America's official spokesperson for the 2009 International Year of Astronomy. He's also been named a NASA ambassador, and today, as of 2026, he remains a regular guest on talk shows and news broadcasts on CNN and MS Now networks. Now, Derek Pitt's equally ebullient counterpart is Neil deGrasse Tyson, director of the Hayden Planetarium and the head of astrophysics at my museum, the American Museum of Natural History in New York. In addition to his museum work, he's also the author of many best-selling books like The Pluto Files and Astrophysics for People in a Hurry. As an educator, he's been seen as the TV host for Science Now and Star Talk, and he's the host of the magnificent reboot of Carl Sagan's Cosmos series on the National Geographic Channel, which you can now stream online. Simply put, like Derek Pitts, he's a person who lives and breathes the world of space. Dr. Beth Brown graduated with honors from Howard University and became the first African American woman to earn a degree in astronomy from the University of Michigan. And her work about elliptical galaxies remains groundbreaking. That work led her to prominent position at NASA's Goddard Flight Center in Maryland, where at the time of her tragically untimely death in 2008 from a pulmonary embolism, she had just been appointed as their assistant director of science communications and higher education. She was a natural in front of the camera and in front of the classroom, and her loss was and is deeply felt. If Black men have found it hard to break into the field of astronomy, Black women have been even more challenged. But Beth Brown and the other astronomers who we've just looked at have paved the way for new generations of African Americans in astronomy and in aerospace. Now, besides the Black astronomers who have opened up the skies for us and for our astronauts that we'll be talking about tonight, there have been a number of remarkable trailblazers who kept America's space program alive and well. And one of the men who broke barriers was Julius Montgomery, who is the first Black man to serve at Cape Canaveral in a role other than a janitor. He earned his first-class radio telescope operator's license and applied for and was hired by Cape Canaveral's RCA Development Lab in 1956. At first, he was ostracized by white co-workers, but he persevered, working primarily among those known as range rats. These were the men who worked on radar systems, telemetry, tracking, and repairs for classified military missiles. He became the first African American to desegregate in 1959 and graduated from Brevard Engineering College in 1961. It's now called the Florida Institute of Technology in Melbourne, Florida. And he began there uh, as a night student, and it was indeed a night school for NASA workers, especially the Black workers. So he really broke barriers there at Florida Institute of Tech. Now, one of NASA's early Black stars was George Carruthers. He earned his PhD in aeronautical and astronomical engineering from the University of Illinois in 1964 and invented the first moon-based observatory, which was used on the 1972 Apollo 16 mission. You can see that compact observatory in the two photographs on the left of your screen. Then, in 1991, he invented a specialized camera that was used in numerous space shuttle missions. You can see it in the lower center. And in 2013, Dr. C was awarded the National Medal of Technology and Innovation by President Obama. But some of the most trailblazers were the women who worked for NASA. Dorothy Vaughan started in 1958 as a mathematician and a quote-unquote human computer at the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, the NCA, which became the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, at Langley Research Center in Hampton, Virginia. She became the supervisor of the West Area Computers at Langley, becoming the first African American woman to supervise a group of staff at the center. During the height of the space race in the 1960s, Vaughan headed the programming section of the Analysis and Computation Division at Langley. In short, she was a computer whiz. Oh, and then there is Mary Jackson. She was first a mathematician and then an aerospace engineer at the NACA and then NASA. Like her friend Dorothy Vaughan, she worked at the Langley Research Center for most of her career. During the 1950s, she was a human computer. These were people who did mathematical calculations literally in their head and using calculators as opposed to having an actual computer do it. So, because a human was doing it, they were called human computers. Now, she did this in the 1950s at the very segregated West Area Computing Division. But after overcoming deeply ingrained racial prejudice, she was allowed to take engineering courses at the University of Virginia. And I'm putting air quotes around the word allowed. And as a result of being allowed to do this, in 1958, Jackson became NASA's first female aerospace engineer. Eventually, she became the manager of the Federal Women's Program at NASA's Office of Equal Opportunity Programs and at NASA's Affirmative Action Program. But perhaps the most well-known, the best known of the early women trailblazers is Katherine Johnson. She was a mathematician and an expert in celestial navigation. She worked for 35 years at both the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, the NACA, and NASA. She calculated the trajectories, launch windows, and emergency backup return paths for several Mercury flights, for the Apollo 11 moon flight, and for several space shuttle missions. She also performed calculations for a few of the early missions to Mars. In addition to co-authoring 26 peer-reviewed scientific papers, she was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2015. And a year later, a 40,000 square foot building was named and dedicated to her. Today, one of the hubs of the Langley Research Center is the Katherine G. Johnson Computational Research Facility. By the way, I absolutely love Annie Leibovitz's photo in the upper right of your screen. It was taken for Vanity Fair magazine on the occasion of Johnson's 98th birthday. We should all look so good at 98. My goodness. Now, perhaps many of you are familiar with the story of Jackson, Vaughan, and Johnson through Margot Shetterly's book, Hidden Figures, and the award-winning 2016 film based on the book. If you haven't read the book or seen the movie, I strongly recommend both. The film was nominated for a Best Picture Oscar, and the photo at the bottom center of your screen shows Johnson's appearance with the cast of the film at the 2017 Academy Awards ceremony. Now, as a sidebar, it's important to note that without the aid of white, mostly male allies within the scientific community and in government, none of these black trailblazers would have had much of a chance of breaking into a bastion of white privilege. So, who would have thought that one of the chief motivators for desegregation at NASA would be an ex-Nazi rocket scientist? But he was. Wernher von Braun, scooped up by the United States at the end of the Second World War, became not only NASA's leading engineer and spokesperson, but its most vigorous supporter of human rights and equality. Von Braun took President Kennedy's affirmative action initiatives and put them into practice at the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama, where he was the director. Much to the chagrin of Governor George Wallace during the 1960s, von Braun made sure that NASA's Huntsville operations hired black men and women in a variety of positions in computer technology and engineering. He also created black colleges and universities to bring engineers into NASA, not just at Huntsville, but in NASA's other operational headquarters. And as just another quick side note, here are those centers. Today, the number has grown to 20 facilities spread around the United States. Some are world renowned. The Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland, the Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena, California, Langley Research Center in Hampton, Virginia, and of course, the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. Now, some facilities are less well known, like the NASA Safety Center in Cleveland, Ohio, and the Plumbrook Station in Sandusky, Ohio. But what they all have in common is NASA's commitment to equal opportunity regardless of race, color, creed, or sexual orientation. And it's thanks to unlikely people like Wernher von Braun back in the 1950s and 60s that many of our African American trailblazers had a chance to trailblaze. And all of this brings us to our 12 remarkable African American astronauts who, as I said, kind of stand on the shoulders of all the people that we've looked at so far. For much more information than I can provide in this program tonight, I recommend the NASA website of all astronauts. And I put this link on my on my webpage. But if you just click on here, what you should be seeing is the NASA site on astronauts. With this interesting factoid, since its inception, NASA has selected 370 astronaut candidates, 299 men, 61 women, 212 military, 138 civilians, 191 pilots, and 159 pilots. And there's information about many of them, if not all, on the website there. Um, I also recommend a Wikipedia list that focuses specifically on the Black astronauts. And this link is also on my website if you would like to explore more. And again, you should be seeing on your screen now a list of African American astronauts. And they're listed kind of in by birth date and the missions that they did and so forth. So it's a great resource for you. Well, we're going to begin with a little prelude, and that is a man named Ed Dwight, who is still going strong at 92 years young. He's often considered the first African American astronaut because the Kennedy administration chose him as a trainee in 1961. He was a very strong candidate with a stellar Air Force career and an engineering degree from Arizona State University. His selection made headlines around the world, and he appeared on the cover of numerous Black news magazines, including Ebony, Jet, and Sepia. Now, unfortunately, during his training at Edwards Air Force Base, he endured rampant discrimination. After the assassination of President Kennedy in 1963, government officials moved him to a German military base where he was assigned to what he soon found out to be a non-existent test pilot program. Ultimately, the Air Force powers that be didn't recommend Dwight despite his excellent record, and he was not included in the first class of all white astronauts. Frustrated, he finally resigned from the Air Force in 1966, and after those experiences, Dwight found that he needed to refocus, so he followed his other great passion, which was art. Indeed, after receiving his BFA from the University of Denver, that's the Bachelor of Fine Arts degree, 1977, he became a full-time sculptor, creating highly regarded prize-winning pieces, primarily art for public spaces, that focus on the Black experience and civil rights activists, such as Rosa Parks and the conductors of the Underground Railroad. Now, I put some of his work on your screen, and you can see they're quite wonderful. But Mr. Dwight has had the last laugh. Yes, on May 19th of 2024, 90-year-old Ed Dwight America's first black astronaut candidate in the 1960s, finally reached space aboard Blue Origin's New Shepard rocket as a black astronaut. The NS-25 suborbital mission made him the oldest person to fly in space at 90 years, 8 months, and 10 days old. He surpassed the record set by William Shatner, who was 90 years and 6 months old during his flight in 2021. Well, for Ed Dwight, it was truly a life-changing voyage that was 60 years in the making. Now, meanwhile, number one in our list of 12 remarkable astronauts who became astronauts. In 1967, the atmosphere around the country had changed somewhat, and NASA, which had been publicly challenged by the mishandling of the Dwight case, chose Robert Lawrence as the first African American for its training program. And by the way, here again, Wernher von Braun kind of stuck his nose into this situation, and he really recommended Lawrence. Now, like Dwight, he was an Air Force officer, and in conjunction with NASA and the Air Force, they selected him for its proposed manned orbital laboratory, one of the first iterations of the International Space Station. And this is way back in the 60s. For both NASA and the Air Force, he flew many experimental aircraft and explored the upper reaches of the atmosphere. NASA would later say that the data they were able to collect from Lawrence's many missions, quote, contributed greatly to the development of the space shuttle program, unquote, many years later. Now, tragically, our first official black astronaut was killed in the crash of an F-104 starfighter in the same year that he had been chosen. NASA confirmed and has since confirmed that had he lived, he would have become one of the original group of 7, meaning that he would have flown in one of the Mercury or Gemini missions. Now, sadly, his death illustrates something we all know, that space exploration can be very dangerous, even fatal. It takes men and women of real courage to go through the program and then to take that leap into space atop a flaming tube of volatile liquid propellants. Our next astronaut, Robert McNair, who held a doctorate in physics from MIT, as well as a 5th-degree black belt in karate, was also an accomplished jazz saxophonist. Chosen for the class of 1978, McNair flew his first space shuttle mission in 1984 as a transport system specialist. On that particular mission, when he was not performing his scientific work, for fun, he played a saxophone to the delight of onlookers back on Earth. And to top it off, his mission of 191 hours was the first to land at the Kennedy Space Center. But as we saw with Robert Lawrence, attempting to reach space can be a very dangerous undertaking. And on his second mission, in January of 1986, McNair was one of the 7 astronauts who were killed when the Challenger space shuttle exploded a mere 2 minutes after takeoff. As a response to the tragedy, Congress provided funding for the Ronald E. McNair Post-Baccalaureate Achievement Program that encourages minorities from low-income families and first-generation college students to pursue graduate studies. And the program, despite the politics of Washington, still thrives. And it's really wonderful to see Dr. McNair's legacy continuing now, many years after his untimely death. Another sidebar, Sadly, Dr. McNair wasn't the only black man to lose his life in space. Physicist Michael Anderson was on the 16-day flight of the Columbia shuttle that had successfully conducted nearly 80 experiments, but the mission ended abruptly on February the 1st of 2003 when the crew perished during re-entry, just 16 minutes before its scheduled landing. Columbia's loss was NASA's first fatal accident during re-entry in the 42-year history of its manned space program. McNair's death had occurred, as I had said, during takeoff. Including the death of 3 Apollo astronauts on the launch pad in a 1967 catastrophe, and several Russian astronauts, a total of 21 people have died on space missions since Russian Yuri Gagarin became the first human to orbit the Earth in April of 1961. So, yes, it's a dangerous undertaking. Astronaut number 3 is Fred Gregory, who just celebrated his 85th birthday last month. He, like Dr. McNair, was also chosen for the class of 1978. After flying over 500 missions in Vietnam, Gregory's expertise as a pilot proved invaluable to the shuttle program. Indeed, he piloted 3 of the original space shuttle spacecrafts. He was chief pilot in 1985 on a Challenger mission, just 7 months before the tragic disaster. He became the first black man to command a space shuttle in 1989 on the Discovery. And in 1991, he was commander on the Atlantis shuttle mission. Now, during his career at NASA, Gregory was associate administrator for the Office of Safety, was chief of astronaut training, was NASA deputy administrator, and in 2005, briefly was NASA's chief administrator before he retired. All firsts for an African-American man. Despite being retired, Gregory is still very active and is now working with NASA on the upcoming Artemis program, specifically on the missions that are planned once we visit the moon for Mars. Another Vietnam veteran, our number 4 astronaut, Guy Bluford, was also a member of the class of 1978, the year he earned his doctorate in aerospace engineering from the Air Force Academy. He became the first African American to travel into space in 1983 when he was a mission specialist on board the Challenger space shuttle. And as you can see from the photo on the left of your screen, his first mission was also the first of those spectacular night launches that later missions would also achieve. Bluford would be on a total of 4 shuttle missions, logging over 680 hours in space. After retiring from NASA in 1993, he went on to become a manager at Northrop Grumman, and since 2002 has been the president and CEO of Aerospace Technology in Cleveland, Ohio, one of the premier aerospace companies in America. So why don't we hear a little bit from Dr. Bluford himself, the first African American in space. This is a Black History Month segment produced for the Weather Channel back in 2021. Now, you may have to adjust the sound on your devices, but I think you're going to find this interesting. So let me set this up for you.
6, 5, we have engine start, 2, 1, we have ignition and we have liftoff.
Space Shuttle mission number 8, August 30th, 1983.
Standing by for main engine throttle down to control.
Historic in several ways. While it was the 3rd flight for Challenger, it was the first launch and landing at night, which the weather threatened to postpone. It was also the first flight for Dr. Guion Bluford, better known as Guy. What was it like being the first African American in space?
It was my job to do the best job possible to open up opportunities for other African Americans. I also knew that I wanted to set the standard, to make people realize that African Americans are very competent.
President Ronald Reagan wasted no time in touting Bluford's accomplishment.
Guy, congratulations. You, I think, are paving the way for many others.
There is no question that he helped break the color barrier in the astronaut office. Guy came in with a PhD, fighter pilot in the Air Force. He had all the credentials and didn't need to explain anything to anybody.
I grew up in a world where I could do anything I wanted to do, so it didn't seem unusual for me to want to be an aerospace engineer.
And then that first flight, the one that almost didn't happen as scheduled.
I can remember vividly their departure from the crew quarters that night to go to the pad. We were in the middle of a thunderstorm. We had just seen this big bolt of lightning strike the tower. Guy and Dick Truly, their commander, just kind of casually strolled out of the van through the rain, got aboard.
Not only am I the first African American to fly in space, but I'm the first African American to have flown a second time, and a third time, and a fourth time.
Bluford flew 4 missions, logging more than 688 hours in space before retiring from NASA in 1993.
I was impressed with the machine. You know, I'm on orbit in this machine going at 18,000 miles an hour, and I'm in awe of it.
I think Guy not only was a mentor and a role model to me as an African-American male, but I think over time Guy became a role model to everyone who saw him.
I'm a firm believer in encouraging people to chase their dream, feel confident that you can get there, plan to succeed.
What do you want your legacy to be?
That I left behind a world that's enriched by what I've done.
Very cool. By the way, one little caveat you probably noticed with a lot of these YouTube videos, the closed captioning is not great, but we do the best we can. Now, one of the people that you heard on that video about Guy Bluford was Charles Bolden, and he turns out to be our next astronaut. Bolden was a member of the class of 1980. He too logged over 680 hours in space. He did this on 4 shuttle missions, twice as the commander and twice as the pilot. Now, I've listed on your screen 3 highlights of those shuttle experiences. First, he was responsible for the deployment of the Hubble Space Telescope in April of 1990. He was also responsible for the first use of the European Space Agency's Space Lab to study Earth's atmosphere in March of 1992. And in 1994, NASA's first joint space shuttle mission with the Russians took place with Bolden as the commander. But perhaps the biggest achievement for Bolden was becoming the first African American to head NASA on a full-time basis. Nominated by President Obama and confirmed by the Senate in 2009, Bolden remained NASA's chief for 8 years of the Obama administration. As 12th administrator, he oversaw many remarkable projects, including the Juno mission to Jupiter, the Mars Curiosity rover, and the initial phases of the James Webb Space Telescope that is thousands of times more powerful than the Hubble telescope he helped deploy in 1990. Well, our number 6 astronaut, Mae Jemison. She might be one of the best known of NASA's black astronauts, thanks to Star Trek. But more of that in a moment. Mae was a member of the class of 1987. Originally trained as a dancer and a choreographer, Jemison graduated from Cornell University with a doctorate in medicine in 1981. Shortly after her graduation, she became an intern at the Los Angeles County Medical Center and then went on to become a general practitioner. Well, after practicing medicine with the Peace Corps in Africa, Dr. Jemison decided, I want a little bit more. What do I want? Gee, I would love to work with NASA. And sure enough, she was accepted by NASA as an astronaut, being one of only 15 accepted out of 2,000 applicants for the 1987 group. Her 1992 flight on the Endeavour made her the first African American woman to travel in space. Well, now here's that Star Trek convention, well, not convention, connection that I promised you, although she's spoken at Star Trek conventions. Yes, she is a Trekkie. Well, it turns out that as a child, Jemison was inspired by the character of Uhura on the original Star Trek series, a role played by Nichelle Nichols, whom you see in the lower right of your screen. Dr. Jemison has remained a lifelong fan of the show. So much so that when LeVar Burton, who played Geordi on Star Trek The Next Generation, heard about her passion for all things Trek, he saw to it that she could have a cameo role on one of its episodes. So, in 1993, there she is in the middle picture there on the right, Jemison appeared as Lieutenant Palmer in an episode called Second Chances. In so doing, by the way, she became the first real-life astronaut to appear in a Star Trek program. Now, since her retirement from NASA, she has remained very active, and among other enterprises, no pun intended, Jemison founded the Dorothy Jemison Foundation for Excellence, naming the foundation in honor of her mother. One of the projects of the foundation is The Earth We Share, a science camp for students 12 to 16. She's also a public speaker for private and public groups to promote science, technology, and the need for better medicine and treatments in third world countries. Jemison is the current CEO of the 100-year Starship Project, which is a joint effort of NASA and DARPA, which is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. Its purpose is to create viable business plans that can foster the research and technology needed for interstellar travel within the next 100 years. So, just as we did with Dr. Bluford, why don't we get a chance to hear from Dr. Jemison herself? First African American woman in space. Now, this segment was produced by public television's long-running program, Nova. And again, you may have to adjust the sound on your devices. And yes, once again, the closed captioning, not always the best, but here we go. By the way, I love that picture of her. Is this not an exuberant person? I love it.
With me.
Okay, so we're going to go back to the beginning. And this is from Nova.
I grew up in the
I'm going to pause it there because
60s. I lived on the south side
not
of
going to full screen here. So this happens once in a blue moon.
Chicago.
Press escape.
And I was a young girl.
And I'm going to start that again. Oh, technology. Again, it doesn't want to do this. Okay.
I grew up in
folks.
the 60s. I lived on the south side of Chicago.
There.
And I was a young girl who loved to stare up at the stars. I imagined myself going there. I studied all the things about the Apollo program. I knew what mission was going to take place when, what it was supposed to accomplish. I decided to go to medical school because I wanted to do something called biomedical engineering. While I was in medical school, I had the opportunity to go and work in a Cambodian refugee camp. I went on a study group in Cuba. I worked with the flying doctors in East Africa. But I still wanted to go into space, so I applied. I picked up the phone. I called down to Johnson Space Center. I said, I would like an application to be an astronaut. They didn't laugh. I turned in the application. There may be a certain naivete when I say, when I applied to the astronaut program, I didn't even think about the fact of whether I would be the first African American woman in space or anything like that. It didn't even cross my, I wanted to go into space. I couldn't have cared if there had been 1,000 people in space before me or whether there had been none. I wanted to go. I thought it was important to take to space with me things that represented people who sometimes are not included. So I took a poster of Judith Jameson performing the dance cry. I took up a Bundu statue, which was for the Women's Society in West Africa. I took up a flag for the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, the oldest African American women's sorority in the United States, because they hadn't been included, and I thought that was an important thing to do. For me, the experience was one that made me feel very connected with the universe. I felt that my being was as much a part of this universe as any star, as any comet. It helped me to recognize that right now, we're in space. This Earth is part of that universe. That was my grand connection. And then I looked down and I saw Chicago. I thought about the little girl who had assumed she would go into space. What would my younger self have thought if she met me? And I think she would have been tickled.
And I love that. Let me close that out. So, yeah, very inspiring. And as I say, I love that picture of the ever exuberant Dr. Mae Jemison. Well, our number 7 astronaut is Bernard Harris, who, like Mae Jemison, is a medical doctor with a degree in internal medicine. In 1995, he was the payload commander for the first joint Russian-American space program mission, and he became the first African-American to walk in space. Over his space shuttle missions, he logged in more than 438 hours and traveled over 7.2 million miles in space. In 1998, after he had retired, he founded the Harris Foundation, a nonprofit organization based in Houston, Texas, whose mission is to support programs that empower individuals to recognize their potential and pursue their dreams. The foundation focuses especially on minorities and others who are economically and/or socially disadvantaged. In other words, his work after NASA is just as remarkable. Our number 8 astronaut is Robert L. Curbeam, who was selected by NASA in December of 1994. He's the veteran of 3 space flights: Discovery in 1997, Atlantis in 2001, Discovery in 2006, and has logged over 901 hours in space, including over 45 hours during 3 spacewalks. He currently still holds the record for the most spacewalks during a single flight. During the 2006 Discovery mission, he actually did 4 spacewalks. He retired from NASA and the Navy in 2007 and joined the private sector, fulfilling a long-time goal of entering the business world. In 2011, after spending 3.5 years as the risk management firm Ares Corp, he became vice president of mission assurance at Raytheon, and in 2015, he joined Raytheon's Space Systems division. He presently works for Astrotech Space Operations as the president and CEO. He's also chairman of the board of the Challenger Center, headquartered in Washington, D.C., which has provided more than 6 million students with experimental education programs that inspire students to pursue careers in science and technology. Leland D. Melvin is our number 9 space traveler. From 1982 to 1985, he attended the University of Richmond and played football, and he still holds the school record as its number 1 wide receiver with 198 receptions for 2,669 yards. In the 1986 NFL draft, he was an 11th round pick by the Detroit Lions as a wide receiver. Unfortunately, during training camp, Melvin pulled a hamstring and was released from the team. Undaunted, he reported to first the Toronto Argonauts of the Canadian Football League, and then to the Dallas Cowboys of the NFL. He did that the following spring. But guess what? He pulled another hamstring, second time. Oy. He did that in the Cowboys camp, and that officially ended his professional football career because it proved to be just completely debilitating. So he shifted gears, and Marvin trained for and was accepted as an astronaut. And by the way, one of his things that he loves to do is to adopt dogs, especially dogs that have been abandoned. And you can see them there, two of them on his official picture. NASA gave him kind of special dispensation to be photographed for his official photograph with two of his beloved animals. Well, between 2008 and 2009, Melvin logged nearly 600 hours in space on two Atlantis space shuttle missions. After retiring from NASA, he became a public speaker and a space commentator on TV. But he also decided to write about his life experiences. And in May of 2017, he published a brutally honest book called Chasing Space, and I do recommend it. In it, he speaks about his being sexually assaulted at the age of 5, his doomed football career, his love for rescue dogs, which you just saw in one of his official NASA photos, and you see it again on the front cover of his book. And he speaks also, of course, of his shuttle missions. Other passions include his role with Spaceship Earth Grants, a public benefit corporation whose mission is to make spaceflight more accessible to individual applicants. He remains one of the two most active TED Talk and STEM speakers around the country. And interestingly enough, I just saw him a few days ago on CNN talking about the upcoming Artemis flights. So yes, he's still very, very active. You know, up to this point, we've focused on NASA astronauts. But as space exploration opens up to include missions operated by civilian organizations like SpaceX and Blue Origin, like the one Ed Dwight finally got to fly on, there are going to be non-NASA black astronauts too. So I've included as our number 10 astronaut, Sean Proctor. Proctor was launched into Earth orbit on September the 15th of 2021 as the pilot of the Crew Dragon space capsule. The mission was called Inspiration 4 and was a private orbital spaceflight with a crew of 4 civilians. As the pilot of that mission, Proctor became the first African-American woman to pilot a spacecraft. Proctor has taught geology at South Mountain Community College in Arizona, and as a very noted Afrofuturist artist, she works in digital, multimedia, and painting mediums. She's also currently an artist in residence at Arizona State University. She's also a major in the Civil Air Patrol, where she serves as the Aerospace Education Officer for its Arizona wing. Among other activities, Proctor has also appeared in the Discovery Channel program The Colony and was science demonstrator on the Science Channel program Strange Evidence. Our 11th highlighted astronaut is Jessica Watkins, who is a geologist, an aquanaut, and a former international rugby player. As a Stanford University undergraduate, Watkins worked at the Ames Research Center to support the Mars Phoenix lander. In 2009, she was chief geologist at NASA's Mars Desert Research Station in Utah. That same year, she was the lead scorer for the USA's women's rugby team at the Rugby World Cup in Dubai. And then, as a graduate student at UCLA, she worked at Jet Propulsion Laboratory in a project that surveyed near-Earth asteroids. And if that weren't enough, Watkins has also worked extensively on new Mars exploration programs, including those that are associated with the Artemis program. By the way, just a word. NASA has a couple of different stations around the country that simulate what it would be like to live on the moon or to live on Mars, where astronauts are literally locked up for a year or so at a time to see how they cope, how they deal with these kinds of situations. And Jessica Watkins is one of those. Watkins also participated in a deep sea mission in 2019 that tested technologies and objectives for deep space mission and lunar explorations. She did this on the seafloor, again, to simulate that kind of claustrophobic world of living in space. So she is also, besides being an astronaut, she's an aquanaut. Watkins' mission was the first of its kind to feature an all-female research team led by Italian astronaut Samantha Cristoforetti. In 2020, Watson began training as part of the Artemis team to return humans to the moon, and as I said, also on the program, in the Artemis program for Mars expeditions. And in 2022, Watkins served as the first African-American woman sent to the International Space Station. She was a mission specialist on NASA's SpaceX Crew 4. It was the first space flight for Watkins and the first flight for the Crew Dragon spacecraft. She's currently preparing for, as I said, future lunar exploration as part of the Artemis team of astronauts. Well, last but not least, our 12th astronaut, Victor J. Glover, who was selected in 2013 as one of 8 members of the 21st NASA astronaut class. He completed astronaut candidate training in 2015, and if all goes well, he will be flying to the moon on the Artemis II mission. Now, as you probably have heard, they've rolled the Artemis II spacecraft back into the launch cargo hangar, and that is probably going to delay the launch now until at least April. But all we can do is, fingers crossed, he will be on that Artemis II mission. Now, in 2020, Glover was pilot of SpaceX's Crew Dragon spacecraft and was the expedition flight engineer aboard the International Space Station. Glover spent 168 days in space, completing 4 spacewalks and several scientific maintenance and outreach activities. In the months after the mission, Glover served as the Human Landing System's crew representative and as the assigned crew branch chief in the astronaut office. But the most momentous event in his spacebound career happened in 2023, when Glover was assigned to be the pilot for the Artemis II mission. And as I say, it's now set to launch probably at some time in April. He will be one of 4 astronauts on the first voyage to the moon in more than 50 years on NASA's path to establishing a long-term presence on the moon for science and exploration, and then eventually Mars. Glover will be joined by Christina Koch, the first woman on a lunar mission, as well as Jeremy Hansen, the first Canadian astronaut to fly to the moon. The fourth member of the crew will be Commander Reed Weissman. The approximately 10-day flight will test NASA's foundational human deep space exploration capabilities, the SLS rocket, exploration ground system, and the Orion spacecraft. Well, let's hear from Victor Glover himself. He's a passionate American who'll be the first Black person to reach the moon. Now, this video is an introduction to Glover that was created by NASA when he was chosen to be on the Artemis team back in 2023. Once again, you may have to adjust the sound on your devices, and the closed captioning is actually a little bit better. Go NASA.
My earliest idea of who I wanted to be growing up was my father. My father was a police officer, and so I wanted to be a police officer. And then I saw a shuttle launch on television, and I thought, I really want to drive one of those. And yes, I said drive because I didn't know any pilots or engineers even for that matter. I'm a public servant, and I have been for 22 years, since January of 1998. And so I ask myself, have I done all that I can for my country and for my family? I have fantasized about stepping on the moon. It's my dream. My dream is to work on the surface of the moon. And being able to launch humans from American soil is a very big part of that. I was sitting at my desk in the Russell Senate office building, and I got a phone call from a Houston phone number, and by the time I answered, I missed it. And so I called back, and after a lot of waiting and being transferred, I was transferred to Janet Kavandi, who was the chair of our board, and she asked me if I wanted to come to Houston and commence training. And I actually pinched myself several times walking back to my office. There is no way that this is a real thing. I'm gonna wake up and be so disappointed. When I woke up the next day, and I actually had an email from Janet saying it was not a dream. That was actually unreal.
He's a lieutenant commander in the United States Navy where he flew F-18s. He came to us from Washington, D.C., where he was serving as the United States Navy Legislative Fellow in the United States Senate. Victor?
Being selected for this job, you can't help but to think of, I've got so many friends that I know could do this job well. And that feeling of, wow, why didn't they get it? And, feeling like you're not really good enough cut out for the job. And I felt all of those things. Being a father, a husband, all of those things come with doubt. And I think you have to learn to get comfortable with the doubt. They call things moonshots when people accomplish something amazing. No matter how good a story you tell, people are captivated by real world accomplishment. It's our generation's opportunity to have our own literal moonshot and then to continue inspiring future generations to reach for the moon.
They not only have the right stuff, they represent the full tapestry of American diversity. Their journey begins now, and the nation will be right beside them, reaching for the stars.
And by the way, just to go back for 2 seconds, you'll notice the logo, the official logo for the Artemis mission. It is blue for the Earth. You see the moon there, kind of at the upper corner there of the A, but the red streak represents future Artemis missions to the planet Mars. So that explains their logo. All right. Woo! So there you have them. Some of the courageous men and women who have broken the color barrier in space exploration. They stand beside the remarkable astronomers and the courageous trailblazers. All of them are the men and the women who have gone to open the windows and doors of the far-flung reaches of the cosmos. Remember, you can find out more about these remarkable men and women on my website, makingwings.net. Just take deeper dive number 13. So why don't we then talk about next month? So we're going to go from flying to the moon to a very interesting human being named Nellie Bly, who was
Yay!
who was the first woman to go around the world. And she's really quite a remarkable person. It's called The Audacious Adventures of Nellie Bly. And that, as we heard at the very beginning, is going to be on March the 12th. March 12th, The Audacious Adventures of Nellie Bly. She was a newspaper reporter, including Frontline during World War One. She was an inventor. She was one of America's first important businesswomen. And yes, that great adventure of going around the world. She had read Jules Verne's novel Around the World in 80 Days, and she said, you know something? I can beat that. And she did. She did it in 72 days. So we're going to find all out about Nellie Bly March the 12th. I hope you can make it. So I would like to thank you all for being here tonight, and I want to thank specifically the Mid-Continent Public Library for once again inviting me to give these programs. It is very much appreciated on my part for letting me do these. So thank you very much.
And we did have one last question in the chat.
Oh, okay.
I have a cousin who dreams of space, but mathematics is a struggle for him. He really wants to work with NASA. Any advice?
That may be trouble if to become an astronaut or to become one of the one of the computers operators. But there are many jobs at NASA that are non-technical kinds of jobs. So what I would suggest is to actually go to the NASA site, and I have done it, and look at their human resources page, which they have one, and you can see job postings. And there are all kinds of things from human resources positions to you name it, to public outreach programs, to educators who go out and speak at schools. So there are a number of different opportunities at NASA besides just purely mathematical or scientific jobs. So that would be my recommendation. Go to the NASA site and human resources. All right. Thank you, Beth.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. We hope you'll be back for Nellie Bly, if not sooner. And have a great evening, everybody.
You take care. Bye-bye. Okay, bye-bye. Goodbye. Goodbye, Joe.